Now, Venom stated this. He stated, "Unless you think CC is a spoiled diva that abused her power to bend the WNBA rules." This one stated, "The righteous or wrongness of this one whistle is not entirely besides the point. One of the most famous basketball players on the planet empathetically declared she was wrong. The few others like her can bend the WNBA to her will. The fact of the matter is, you cannot get a technical foul for clapping and you call it taunting. The WNBA is looking like the old school mafia, bro. It's looking like she mafiofo is murd. She is not shy about articulating grievances or exhibiting."
The technical foul called on Caitlin Clark during a recent Indiana Fever game has reopened a debate that has followed the WNBA for much of this season. Whether the league's officiating standards are applied consistently, or whether some players are held to a different threshold than others. The incident itself was simple enough on its face. Clark was on the bench, not on the court, when she clapped in response to a play. Officials assessed her a technical foul for the gesture. In isolation, a clap from the bench drawing a technical would strike most observers as an unusually strict application of the rule. But the call did not arrive in isolation. It arrived in the context of a season already marked by recurring questions about how technical fouls are issued, reviewed, and in some cases reversed, depending on who commits them. The comparison that has gained the most traction among fans and analysts involves Paige Bueckers. Earlier in the season, Bueckers received a technical foul that was later rescinded upon league review. The reversal was treated, at the time, as a routine correction, the kind of administrative fix that happens when a call is reviewed and found to be excessive or unwarranted. What it also did, intentionally or not, was establish a precedent. If a technical foul can be reviewed and removed when the underlying conduct does not rise to the level the rule is meant to address, that standard should apply uniformly. The expectation, reasonable on its face, is that a similar review process would be available to any player in a similar situation. Clark's bench technical has not been rescinded. For a significant portion of the WNBA's audience, that discrepancy is the actual story, more than the original call itself. It is not simply that a clap drew a technical foul. It is that the league has already demonstrated, through the Bueckers reversal, that it is willing to revisit and correct technical fouls it considers disproportionate to the conduct involved. The absence of a similar review in Clark's case raises a straightforward question. What distinguishes the two situations, and why has one been corrected while the other has not? This is not a new pattern this season. Clark has been at the center of officiating discussions since her rookie year, when contact against her during drives to the basket was frequently described by analysts and former players as inconsistent with how similar contact was called against other guards. The criticisms was not that Clark was being targeted maliciously by officials, but that the threshold for what constituted a foul against her appeared to shift depending on the game, the officiating crew, and at times the broadcast. Some of that criticism has softened, as the league has acknowledged, in general terms, the difficulty of officiating a player who draws as much defensive attention and physical contact as Clark does on a possession-by-possession basis. But the technical foul disparity introduces a different kind of inconsistency, one less about physical contact and more about discretion. Technical fouls, unlike most personal fouls, are not purely reactive judgment calls made in the flow of play. They are calls made specifically about conduct, intent, and demeanor, which means the standard applied to them says as much about the league's posture toward a given player as it does about the player's actual behavior. Stephanie White's handling of the situation has also become part of the conversation, though for different reasons than the technical itself. White did not aggressively contest the call in its immediate aftermath, a decision that some fans and commentators have read as a missed opportunity to advocate publicly for her player. Others have pointed out that coaches rarely contest technical fouls assessed for conduct, since the league's review process for those calls operates differently than it does for ordinary officiating disputes, and public criticism of officials carries its own financial penalties under league rules. Whatever the explanation, the lack of a visible pushback from the Fever's coaching staff left the burden of raising the inconsistency to fall almost entirely on outside analysts, media members, and fans, rather than the organization itself. The broader context here matters. The WNBA has experienced a significant increase in viewership and media attention over the past 2 seasons, driven in large part by the arrival of a rookie class that includes Clark, Bueckers, Angel Reese, and several other players who have brought new audiences to the league. That growth has been accompanied by closer scrutiny of every aspect of the league's operations, officiating included. Calls that might have gone largely unnoticed in seasons with smaller audiences are now dissected in detail, compared against similar plays from other games, and circulated widely within hours. This scrutiny is not inherently unfair to the league. If anything, it has surfaced inconsistencies that existed before this season but lack the audience size to generate sustained attention. The Booker's reversal and the Clark non-reversal are a useful pairing precisely because they occurred close enough together and under similar enough circumstances that a side-by-side comparison is possible in a way it often is not with officiating disputes from prior seasons. There is also a structural question worth raising about how technical fouls are reviewed in the WNBA more generally. The league has not published a detailed, consistent standard explaining when a technical foul will be reviewed after the fact, what criteria determine whether one is rescinded, and how quickly that review process is expected to conclude. Without that transparency, fans and media are left to infer the standard from outcomes, which is precisely how comparisons like the Buickers and Clark situations come to dominate the conversation. When the process itself is unclear, every individual case becomes evidence in an ongoing argument about whether the league's enforcement is consistent. Rather than being evaluated on its own terms, it is worth being precise about what is and is not being argued here. The claim is not that officials are deliberately biased against Clark, or that the league is engaged in any coordinated effort to undermine her. Most analysts who have raised concerns about the officiating disparity have been careful to frame it as an inconsistency in application rather than an accusation of intent. The distinction matters. Inconsistent enforcement can result from a combination of factors that have nothing to do with targeting a specific player. Turnover among officiating crews, a lack of standardized training across crews, the pressure of officiating games with significantly higher stakes and audience attention than before, and the simple reality that judgment calls about conduct are inherently subjective. None of those explanations excuses the disparity, but they do reframe the conversation away from intent and toward process. The fix being called for by critics is not punishment of individual officials, but a clearer and more consistently applied standard for when technical fouls are issued and when they are reviewed. The Booker's comparison has resonated specifically because it offers a clean test case. Both players are rookies who arrived with substantial pre-existing fan bases and media attention. Both have been subject to increased scrutiny of every foul call involving them, simply because more cameras and more analysts are watching their games closely than would have been the case for a similar rookie 5 years ago. When the league reversed a technical against one and has not done the same for the other, despite public comparisons being drawn almost immediately, it invites the question of what internal process, if any, determines which calls get a second look. For Fever fans specifically, frustration compounds an already difficult stretch of the season marked by questions about coaching decisions, rotation patterns, and front office communication. None of those issues are directly related to officiating, but they contribute to a broader sense among the team's fan base that decisions affecting Clark and the Fever are not being made with the same rigor or accountability applied elsewhere in the league. Whether or not that perception is fully accurate in every instance, it has become a recurring theme in how the team's season is being discussed by its own supporters, and the technical foul situation has become one more data point in that narrative rather than an isolated incident. What happens next will likely depend on whether the league addresses the disparity directly, either by reversing the call, by explaining why it differs from the Booker situation, or by clarifying its review process going forward. Silence on the matter is unlikely to resolve the underlying frustration, since the comparison between the two technical fouls is specific enough and public enough that it will continue to surface in coverage of both players for as long as it remains unaddressed. A clear explanation, even one that does not result in a reversal, would at least give fans and analysts a standard to evaluate future calls against. The absence of that explanation leaves the inconsistency to stand as its own argument, one that has already shaped a significant portion of how this stretch of the season is being remembered by the league's audience. The episode also reflects a larger tension the WNBA will likely continue to navigate as its visibility grows. A league accustomed to operating with limited external scrutiny is now operating under conditions where nearly every decision, officiating included, is subject to immediate public comparison and debate. That scrutiny is in many ways a function of the league's own success in attracting a larger and more engaged audience. But it also raises the bar for the kind of consistency and transparency the league will be expected to demonstrate, particularly in cases involving its most visible players, where any perceived disparity is guaranteed to draw outsized attention regardless of the league's intent.